Welcome back from the commercial break, ladies and gents. We're already going into the second half of Wave 1, and the robots are about to run another offensive play. We have a giant combo coming up on the right flank, but veteran underscore heads left to hold up main. Zero Tour rookie Salty is calling for focus fire on the med. Say, Janet, this is a young team we've got here today.
That's right, Mike. Other than the point man, none of these guys has played for more than 7 seasons in the Two Cities League, and like you said, it's Salty's first. It's very rare to see so many fresh faces on an all-scout team.
Things are heating up. We've got at least one man down on the field and more demos spawning from main. JT's got milk on the med, but it's got a charge. It might... No! Underscore drops the med clean. The soldier is all alone, folks.
Underscore backs off and Wylan takes the point. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Salty jumps in as Underscore circles around into tower and takes the cutoff.
Looks like we've got a 4v1. Salty goes down. The robot scores some last-minute points, but... Oh! Underscore's down! This might be a wipe, folks. But is it enough? Blue is running out of steam.
Mike, that soldier is at 250. I'm sorry, 130. He's not getting very far.
You're right, Janet. There he goes. That basically wraps up Wave 1. Red just needs a minute to clean up the last few bots. 3, 2, and there's Big Tony with the finish. Don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back for Wave 2.
There are two ways to play the Scout in Man vs. Machine, the right way and the popular way. If you have any familiarity at all with the game, I'm sure you've heard about the so-called meta Scout playstyle. Collect money, throw Mad Milk, and mark giant robots for death with the Fan of War. I am not here to teach you that playstyle. Top-tier players don't do it that way, and neither will you once you're done with this video. If you're curious, there are already a million guides out there ready to tell you all about it, but I wouldn't recommend any of them because that strategy is weak. And the meta agrees with me. What? That's right, as part of the meta doctrine, you're taught that the Scout is basically a pathetic class and only tolerated as a necessary evil in order to collect money. Meta Scouts often switch to a, quote, stronger class once they think enough credits have been collected. But the Scout is only weak if you follow the meta doctrine. When you don't handicap yourself by buying upgrades in the exact opposite of the optimal order, the Scout becomes a powerful combat class. Sure, he might not have the raw theoretical damage output of the Heavy or the Demo Man, but his superior mobility allows him to project the power he does have much more effectively. And sometimes that's more important. If you need further convincing that it's not a good idea to have 17% of your team be basically pacifist in a horde invasion game mode, pause the video now to read the on-screen text. Otherwise, here's the secret to being an effective Scout in Man vs. Machine. Run around and shoot stuff, just like in regular TF2. Yeah, other than a little practice, all you need to do is not screw yourself over by adopting a counterproductive, overly passive playstyle. Who knew? As usual, stock is a solid choice for your primary weapon, especially if that's what you're accustomed to in regular Team Fortress 2. Scattergun meat shots do over 100 damage per round at point-blank range. Not bad, but if you want even more damage output, the Soda Popper or the Shortstop might be the gun for you. For all practical purposes, the Soda Popper has the higher damage output rate, and as a bonus has a handy quintuple jump ability that can be unlocked by shooting robots and charging its hype meter. The Shortstop can technically achieve higher DPS, but it requires about 4,000 credits worth of upgrades to surpass the Soda Popper, at which point the game is almost over. It does have the benefit of not losing effectiveness as much at long range, and it has a shove mechanic that can theoretically be used to push robots off of cliffs, but beware that the Scout takes 20% extra knockback while this weapon is active, which can be quite annoying. The secret behind these weapons' power is that they both reload their entire clip at once, allowing the Scout to upgrade clip size and shoot almost continuously. The Force of Nature can actually do the same thing, but its knockback effect will really annoy any of your teammates that have to aim or otherwise predict robot movement. So, piss off your teammates at your own risk, and don't blame me if you get vote kicked for using the force of nature. Other options include the backscatter, which gets mini crits when shooting robots in the back, but has a smaller clip size, larger bullet spread, and doesn't get random crits. Basically, a slight downgrade from the stock scattergun. The Babyface's blaster is similar, except that it trades the mini crit mechanic for a speed boost meter that's really hard to keep filled. In practice, you just have a smaller clip and move 10% slower most of the time. Also a slight downgrade from the stock scattergun, but still usable. Mad Milk is by far the best secondary option for the scout, especially if your team doesn't have a medic. Enemies drenched in Mad Milk will let teammates heal back his health 60% of the damage they do, which is great for heavies, pyros, and even soldiers. Mad Milk can also be upgraded to slow down robots, especially giant scouts. But for a good scout, Mad Milk is only a useful sidearm, not your sole reason for existence. And the other secondary options are not useless. Bonk, Atomic Punch, Criticola, and the Scout's pistols each have their niche uses, especially if your team class balance isn't particularly favorable to using milk. Even a fun weapon like the Flying Guillotine is still something. The Fan of War is a decent melee weapon for the Scout. It allows you to mark one robot, temporarily causing all normal damage against it to be mini crits. Some people regard this weapon as mandatory, but I see players spamming it at inappropriate times, such that the opportunity costs outweigh the benefits. This happens much more than I see players actually using it effectively, so as a result I regard the Fan as a specialized weapon for experienced players only. Telling new players to use it only distracts them from learning the basics of the class. The appropriate time to use this weapon is against bosses or against early game giants that demand prolonged focus from multiple players to destroy. Rather than equipping a situational weapon, I personally tend to stick with the Atomizer. Its extra jump is a convenient way to improve mobility without dumping credits into the jump height upgrade. And since I mainly use it to take shortcuts around the map when I'm not actively fighting, I don't have to put away my gun and my milk so I can use this third weapon in the middle of combat. Anyway, I think these two weapons are the only ones that provide a benefit over just some version of the stock bat. Some people like to equip the Sandman because it can be converted into a sort of ranged version of the Fan of War. But this upgrade is one of the most costly in the game, and the weapon decreases your base health whether you buy that upgrade or not. While it can be fun to stun robots with a baseball, the practical utility of the Sandman is dubious. The Candy Cane is another odd weapon with an interesting perk. It can be used to litter the map with health packs for your team, which can be helpful at times. Just be sure to unequip this weapon on waves with lots of bombs and rockets, since you will take extra explosive damage. Other melee options for the Scout are pretty inconsequential and won't really help or hurt all that much. Throw out everything you've ever heard about how the Scout should upgrade. You need to upgrade your gun first, and the way to do this depends on your weapon choice. Here are the upgrade paths that maximize raw damage output for different weapons. As you can see, there are two main types of Scout primaries: guns that reload one round at a time, like the soldier's rocket launcher, and guns that reload their entire clip all at once, although the shortstop is kind of its own thing. You shouldn't necessarily put all of your money into your gun right away though. Other early game upgrades to consider include crit resistance. Buy it as soon as crits and mini crits become a problem, and no sooner. Minus 35% speed on target for the Mad Milk. Buy it for waves where giant scout robots might be a problem. Otherwise, it's not needed. Healing, not slowdown, is the main point of Mad Milk. And finally, movement speed. In the Meta Scout doctrine, movement speed is typically considered an absolute must, but it's more of a personal preference upgrade, really. Movement speed helps any class dodge attacks better, and the Scout is no exception, but the Scout is pretty fast already, and he also needs to aim. Too much speed might throw your aim off, especially if you play the Scout a lot in regular TF2. Buy as much as you're comfortable with when you think you need it. Once your damage output is at least halfway upgraded, you can start investing in the lower priority blast, bullet, and fire resistances, additional ammo capacity if you haven't gotten it already, projectile penetration to increase your effectiveness against tight clusters of robots, and maybe even recharge rate for your Mad Milk. Mad Milk Recharge is another upgrade that is often overvalued by Scout players with a support playstyle. The base recharge rate for Mad Milk is already more than enough for most scenarios, so spending 1,000 credits to increase it is usually an expensive way to get diminishing returns. Some clever support Scout players have found that ammo and clip refill canteen charges are actually a cheaper and more reliable way to make sure they always have milk handy. Oh, and do not upgrade your melee weapon. And do not upgrade any secondary weapon other than Mad Milk. So here's the thing about money, milk, and mark. You can do all of those things and still shoot robots at the same time. A scout that only focuses on these three things is a waste of a player slot. The 3 M's are a relic from a bygone era when at least 2 heavies, no medic, and maybe not even a buff banner soldier were the norm for an MVM team. Mad Milk and the Fan of War were much more useful back then than they are on today's servers. New missions have been released, and different classes are popular now. Ever since 2013, with Kritzkrieg medics on almost every team, pure support scouts are not just suboptimal, they're redundant and do not usually carry their own weight. A scout that only uses his support weapons is like an engineer that only builds dispensers and teleporters. Indeed, a good way to save marginal teams that are stuck on a wave is to have the meta scout switch to a more unambiguously combat-oriented class, and then take their place as scout using the techniques I'm about to describe. One of the things that makes the scout unique is a lovely passive ability that sucks all money within a given radius toward him. This is why many teams designate the scout as their dedicated money collector. If there's a scout on the team, the credit score for each wave will almost automatically be an A, just by virtue of everyone playing the objective and not getting steamrolled. Where a lot of scouts go wrong, however, is by obsessively scouring the map for every last bit of money when the team is having difficulty just handling the bomb objective. Only go out of your way to look for missing money if it's a big sum, or if there's a lull in the action. Do not force your team to play short-handed while you go on an Easter egg hunt to try and artificially force an A+. And speaking of money, each pile of cash the scout collects heals him, granting a potentially massive overheal that makes him pretty hard to kill unless he's all alone without team support. Not that dying as the scout is a big deal. His third unique ability is that he always gets a fast respawn no matter what. Beat him down and he just gets right back up again, possibly with some extra firepower after a quick stopover at the upgrade station. In fact, that's why it's silly to waste all of your money on defensive upgrades. Compared to all of the other classes, there are virtually no consequences to dying as the scout, other than maybe the sting of losing your kill streak. Now that you know about the scout's special abilities, and I've warned you about some of the common pitfalls, it's time to tell you what you actually should be doing. The Scout is a close combat class who is most effective when dealing meat shots at point-blank range, so a lot of becoming proficient depends on understanding robot AI, anticipating its reaction to you, and learning to dodge its attacks. When the robots are focused on a beefy ally like a heavy or a sentry, playing the Scout is easy. Just run up behind the bots and start shooting them in the back. Direct confrontations require a little more finesse. One of the simplest tactics for defeating robots in open combat is circle strafing. Bots can only track a target so quickly, and they have a hard time hitting something that runs around them in circles. This can allow the scout to take down squads of robots, even giant robots, single-handedly. Weaving back and forth is a good way to keep sniper bots from locking onto you, and also to dodge rockets and other projectiles. Other simple tactics include dodging in and out of cover and just staying out of the range of pyros and melee robots. The general idea is to get the robots to shoot where you used to be. It's really not that complicated. If you can, approach the more dangerous robots from the flank or from the rear. That way, you can safely get in close before you engage. Not only do your weapons do more damage up close, but techniques like circle strafing work best in close, tight circles. It's easier to outrun the robot's turning speed because there's less distance to travel per degree. In combat, the scout excels against giant robots. They're big, slow-moving targets, easy to hit again and again with meat shots until they die. Also, where a class like the Heavy might have difficulty in a struggle of raw power without the aid of a pocket medic, the Scout's superior evasion allows him to defeat virtually anything in single combat, no matter how strong, even out in the open with no cover to hide behind. The only things that the Scout is better at killing than giant robots are tanks, which are basically giants that don't shoot back, exposing them to the full brutality of the Scout's maximum damage output. Now, it's hard to say what the best loadout in the game for killing tanks is, because there are a lot of situational factors to consider. But let's just say that the only two weapons in the game that are unambiguously better at tank busting than the Scout is are the Baker's Bazooka and the Phlogistinator. That's right, the only two weapons, not the only two classes. Despite what you may have heard, the Pyro isn't the undisputed king of tank busting. Any Scout loadout can outperform the stock flamethrower against tanks, given about 3,000 credits or so. And as far as I can tell, the flame particle damage trick you may have heard about doesn't change that. When it comes to regular robots, the Scout's matchups are a mixed bag. I think the Soldier Bot is usually his toughest combat matchup because splash damage can be hard to dodge. Similarly, Pyro Bots can spray fire indiscriminately, and it's hard to avoid taking at least some damage. Scout Bots are not usually that dangerous offensively, but their speed can make them relatively tricky to deal with anyway. Heavy and Demo Bots are possibly the Scout's best matchups. Both classes are usually slow and easy to hit, and Heavies take time to spin up their guns, while Demos have a hard time hitting fast targets with grenades. Snipers are not usually much of a threat, nor are Spies, although their speed can make them a chore to kill. And of course, Engineer Bots can almost completely shut you out of an area, if they manage to set up a sentry gun. Medic Bots deserve special attention. As a flank class, the Scout is often able to engage medics before his teammates can. He isn't as effective at taking out whole groups of them as the Demo Man and the Sniper are, but he is perfectly able to drop them if need be. Without any damage upgrades, this will take 2 carefully aimed, medium-range shots to avoid triggering a charge. But with 3 or 4 levels of the damage upgrade, a single meat shot is more than enough. The main challenge to killing medic bots is the erratic stop-start way that they move when they're healing a patient. It can be difficult to land a clean shot under pressure. Giant medics are easier. They're not hard to hit, and you basically just have to hold down attack and fire continuously until they're dead. Sometimes you'll get unlucky and they'll use their charge, but that's still not a problem if you pop them early. While you shouldn't be focusing too much on money, it is a good idea to check your HUD every once in a while. The HUD shows how much money you have available to buy upgrades on the top, and how much money has fallen onto the battlefield ready to be collected at the bottom. If the bottom number is green, no money has been missed for the current wave. If it's black, some money has already burned up before it could be collected. Take a glance at these numbers every 15 seconds or so to make sure the bottom number isn't getting too big. If it does start to get large, then it might be time to drop what you're doing and go look for money. If you're not in immediate danger of losing the wave, that is. The bomb objective takes priority. Don't forget that money heals you. Going a bit out of your way to grab a pile of cash is a great way to get a defensive buff right before you engage a group of robots, especially if it's a big cluster of cash piles. In fact, try to keep well-meaning teammates from scooping up all of the big, obvious piles of money that are right out in the open unless they are legitimately in danger of burning up. Even though money collection is a team effort, they are essentially robbing you of a lot of health. Try to get them to redirect their zeal toward picking up money that's actually in danger of being overlooked. If you have Mad Milk equipped, save it for when it's needed most. Usually, this means high-priority giant robots or large squads of regular robots. Milk heals in proportion to damage done, so use it against high health targets that will be taking a lot of damage and also causing damage that needs to be healed. The one exception is when you want to slow the bomb down, usually because a giant scout has it. Finally, the scout is a pretty chaotic class that can be everywhere at once. That's good, you want to confuse the bots, but try to keep the grief that you cause your teammates to a minimum. Don't throw Mad Milk on sentry busters unless it is specifically requested. Slowing them down can really throw off the engineer's rhythm. Don't run through big sticky bomb traps. Robots will shoot at you, which might scatter the stickies, making the trap useless. Probably don't equip the Force of Nature, for the reasons I mentioned before. If there is a competent sniper or demo man to handle the problem, refrain from attacking Uber medics unless you're confident you can make the shot yourself. But go ahead and shoot if your team doesn't have one. Or he's bad. Or he's dead. If there are other flank classes on your team, like the Spy and the Pyro, try to give them some space and avoid needlessly drawing fire toward them. They have a longer respawn timer than you do. Okay, you're almost ready to shame some two-city soldier mains with your combat prowess. Typically, the expectations for the Scout on any given man versus machine server will be pretty low, which can work in your favor if this is your first time trying out an aggressive playstyle. On man-up servers, players with a low torque count will get a bit more scrutiny, but mostly, other players will just verbally check to make sure you have the proper meta loadout. In other words, the Mad Milk and the Fan of War. They don't even care whether or not you have the Force of Nature equipped, or one of the weaker scatterguns, and they usually don't even pay attention to your upgrades unless you're doing badly. And to be clear, they're mainly checking to make sure you have the weapons equipped, not whether you actually use them. There are anecdotes of scouts getting congratulated by their teammates for a job well done, even though they were stuck in the civilian pose or had unbound their attack key and did literally nothing except collect money for the entire game. In fact, money collection is the only aspect of your gameplay that other players are likely to pay attention to, and it is famously the main metric they will use to judge you. Even though it is literally a team effort on the scoreboard. Usually, if the team gets a credit rank of at least an A, everyone will be happy, although some sticklers demand an A+. I think the MVM community as a whole is a little more laid back about this than they were some years ago, but credit rank is still largely viewed as the Scout's domain. Friendly players will go out of their way to assure the Scout that it's okay that he missed 20 credits, after the whole team got steamrolled and the Scout had to deal with a 12v1 instead of looking for money. And again, the burden of scrutiny falls more heavily on less experienced players. If the Scout has a high torque count, he has credibility, and other players are more likely to turn on their critical thinking skills and realize that maybe, just maybe, it's not his fault alone. Maybe the money was impossible to reach, or it was just bad luck, or whatever. Some teammates who pay attention to the credit indicator in real time may also get nervous if you leave money sitting on the ground for more than 10 seconds while you're off doing something more important, like helping to kill a tank. And they might express their frustration with you verbally. After all, they're used to having scouts that are underachievers focused on the one and only task that anyone actually judges them on. always ready to swoop in and grab money more or less immediately. Sometimes, other players may ask you to take care of a hard-to-reach sniper bot because of your mobility, although long-range classes and classes with explosive jumping abilities are often better at this than the scout is, depending on the map. As I alluded to earlier, your teammates might suggest you switch to another class for the last wave of a mission because we don't need any more money. This is usually framed as a courtesy offer for you to switch to a class that's actually fun, not as a demand, but it's still something to be aware of. Not that it applies to you. When played properly, the Scout is one of the most exciting classes in the game, and the last wave can be the best part of the mission. Also, the modern refund mechanic is a dumb exploit-turned feature that waters down the game mode by negating the entire point of the upgrade system, and how dare you suggest I'm that kind of girl? As you may have gathered from all of this, the typical MVM player is accustomed to the Scout being at the bottom of the scoreboard, although occasionally pacifist Scouts are able to inflate their score with lots of token assist points from Mad Milk, especially if there isn't a medic on the team. Not only is the Scout expected to have the least points, he's also expected to have the least damage on the server. Even less damage than the medics somehow, the purest support class in the game. This is why I refer to meta Scouts as underachievers. An experienced Scout should expect to finish the mission with as much or more damage than less experienced teammates on other classes. The biggest exceptions would be if one player is being pocketed by the medic, or if a pyro has liquid skill in a can equipped as their primary weapon. Finally, some players acknowledge the Scout's potential as a useful combat class, but they see it as more of an alternative playstyle. You know, for bored high-tier players looking to challenge themselves, rather than as a valid strategy for the average player. No. Just no. Playing properly as the Scout is almost always more effective than the meta play style, and it takes less skill than PvP Scout. I used to do it on a crappy laptop that got 15 frames per second on a good day. Here's an idea. If playing as the Scout is genuinely too hard for some people, maybe they're playing on the wrong difficulty level. This has been Underscore Gaming's Man vs. Machine tutorial series, The Scout. Please share this video with any underachiever Scouts you run into. Even if they don't watch the tutorial and just leave a comment saying how I'm wrong about everything, it's okay. I hear the YouTube algorithms love that. And subscribe so you don't miss the next video, which will be out before 2021. Probably.